All right, so what we're doing today, I'm going to try to dive right into it for the most part. Ideally, you were able to watch the video from last class. We're doing more of the same today. This whole week is, for the most part, we're going to practice the kinds of things I would like you to do whenever you figure out your text. All right? And most of you are going to choose a visual medium, movies, TV, something like that. So I feel like making our class text a visual medium just makes sense. If none of that made sense to you, hopefully it'll make sense as we go, but I sum it up like this. So if you think back to Vonnegut, when we read this book, I would give you a page number, we'd read a paragraph or two, and we would pick out details, right? Like, what does this guy say, or how is this depicted, or what does this person do, right? Different things like that. And that would kind of bring up certain ideas, certain arguments, and we would talk about them. Same rules apply here, okay? We're going to look at a couple scenes, and we're going to try to pick out details. All I want you to do today, take some notes. If you have to write it down, if you have to type it, I don't care. Whatever works for you. But as we're watching these scenes, they're only going to be a couple minutes long a piece. Does anything stand out to you as potentially significant?
For Die Hard?
Yeah.
I feel like he always tries to be like the man of the house. I feel like that's like big for him. Like I feel like he wants to fit like that, like
We're going to talk
that
about
takes
it.
care of the family.
Actually, with the first scene, we'll probably talk about that. But if you feel that way, which I could agree to a point, see if you see anything in this first scene that helps. And that's what I mean. So basically when I say look for details, we're talking about look for evidence. Like if you were to write about Die Hard, which we are not, but if you were to write about Die Hard, when you go looking for evidence, that's what we're pulling out now. And if you have ideas or arguments that spring to mind as a result of that, by all means we can talk about it. But the lowest bar is just, this seems like it's important and I don't know why. I will accept that as well. Okay. Gotta turn out the lights to do this. So. Oh, I should turn on the projector though, or I will not find my way back. Not safely, anyway. All right, we'll let that heat up for a second. The first scene we're going to watch, part of the reason I chose it is it actually does a really good job of sort of recapitulating the argument we made in yesterday's class. Recapitulating is a very fancy verb for restate. But basically, all last class we talked about the big idea, I think, that's at the heart of this scene. And we'll talk about it. What this scene is. This is McClane. Ooh, you're not going to let me. Hang on. I'm being sabotaged. There we go. McClane is finally into the building. He's met Holly. They're in her office. And they're going to finally have some kind of serious talk because they clearly need to, right? And we're going to see what happens.
You'll have to forgive Ellis. He gets very depressed this time of year. He thought he was God's greatest gift, you know?
I know the type. He's got his eye on you.
It's okay, I have my eye on his private bathroom. Where are you staying? This happened so fast, I didn't get a chance to ask you on the phone.
Kathy Roberts retired out here.
Oh, yeah?
Told me I could bunk in with him.
Kathy retired, huh? Where does he live?
Ramona.
Pomona.
Huh?
Pomona.
Pomona.
Yeah. God, you'll be in the car half the time. Why don't we make it easy? I have a spare bedroom. I mean, it's not huge or anything, but kids would love to have you at the house.
I would have.
I would too. Sorry. I missed you.
I guess you didn't miss my name, though, huh? Except maybe when you're signing checks. Since when did you start using Ms. Gennaro?
It's a Japanese company. They figure married women's got
You are a
more
married
fun.
woman, Holly. You're married to
Well,
me.
we're gonna have this
Remember, you
conversation
always
again. We
was
did this in
talking about-
July.
We never finished this
I had
conversation
an
in
opportunity.
July.
I had to
Yeah,
take it.
right. No matter what the consequences, no matter what it did to our marriage,
It
you had
didn't
to
do
take
anything
this
to our marriage
opportunity.
except maybe change your idea of what our
I
marriage
don't
should
think
be.
you have a clue as to what my idea of
I
our
know
marriage should be, Holly.
exactly what your idea of our marriage should be.
Mr. Nerai. Excuse me. Mr. Takagi is looking for you. He wants you to say something to the troops.
Thank you. Speech time. Be back in a few minutes.
All right. So, just anything at all that you guys noticed stood out to you as potentially significant. That's the low bar we have for today. Anything at all that you picked up on?
He was hot about her changing her last name.
Did not care for that. And again, we can start with the fairly obvious here. Why does that bother him, do you think?
I don't think he wants to get divorced, I guess.
Yeah, that would seem to send a certain kind of signal, right? They've been separated for 6 months. He shows up, discovers she's going by her maiden name now. That does not bode well, we could say, right? Pretty easily. Okay. But again, because we can say that pretty easily, that's not going to be like a body paragraph, right? We're not going to say, clearly they're having marital issues, because it's like, well, clearly they are. So we got to go a little bit further. And I think that we can. Specifically, I think they bring it up in this scene, right? Like what, somebody take a shot at this. What seems to be, you don't have to get the whole thing, but like they're disagreeing about something, right? Like what are they disagreeing about, do you think?
That's what I was thinking of when I was this scene that I was talking about. I feel like he just wants to be like the he wants to be like the man of the house. Like he wants to be like he didn't want her to go get her own career. It seems like he wanted to like take care of everybody his own way.
Okay, if you could, why do you feel that way? Why do you think that?
Because like when they were in the limo before this, and
Right,
they were
right.
talking about like she moved away and this and that to take her own career and stuff like that. He just seemed like, oh yeah, whatever. But like it was like he was like, you didn't think she was gonna be successful, and he's like, oh yeah, you're fast.
Yeah.
She was really successful.
So the whole thing we talked about last time. Yeah. So that's absolutely part of it. The conversation he has with Argyle about sort of what McClane expected for Holly versus what happened and how that apparently changed things. And they're talking about that here because he says, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like, no matter what it would do to our marriage, right? Like he's arguing to her that the choices you've made coming out here, obviously being promoted and like whatever, has somehow irrevocably damaged their marriage, is what he's saying to her. Did anyone remember how she responds to that? She says something to him that's pretty important about marriage.
She said something.
This image of the marriage?
His idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. She calls into question. Like she basically says, you think our marriage should be one thing, but I think it should be something else, is what she implies there. And then they have the typical, I don't know how many fights you've been in, but they start talking over each other. It's pretty standard. Are there any other reasons? I'm with you there, I think. But say we wanted to find a little more evidence, whether it's in this scene or another one, I don't mind, to think about McClane and what he wants out of his marriage. Like how do you guys picture that and why, given what we know about him? What do we know about him? We can start there.
He's a cop in New York.
He's a New York cop. And like we talked about last time, we have certain expectations for that or certain associations with that kind of description, right? Especially because of how he carries himself. He kind of fits that description in a lot of ways, right? In the way that he moves through this world. Sure. Does any of that help us think about how he might view his marriage, or like what he might want out of it? Do you think? And if none of that makes sense, I do think you could do that just with this scene. But last several. But basically, what we're driving at is we're trying to prove the idea we started with here, which is McClane seems to want a certain kind of marriage, and you characterized it, so I'm not going to do it again, but he wants a certain kind of marriage. Let's start there. What kind of marriage does McClane seem to want, do you guys think?
A tradition.
Okay, good. So traditional, old school, 50s, 60s, like that whole, okay. So clearly, and again, this is fairly obvious in the scene, he's bothered by Holly's success. We could put it that way. That may not be entirely fair to him. We're not saying that he doesn't want his wife to succeed, right? That's not fair to him. But the success that she has had has altered that in some way. They can't have that marriage now. And so the next question is, well, why not?
Seems like she's the breadwinner.
Well, they both make money now, right? Like, and I want to make this important point. She says, before they start having a fight, she would like him too, right? She says the kids would like to have you for Christmas, and she's like, you know, I would like to. Like she tells you, I miss you. Like she wants to reconnect. She wants them to still have a relationship. I think that's important. Rather than maybe the breadwinner, maybe she's a breadwinner would be more accurate, right? But again, what does that do to this traditional marriage? How does it mess that up?
It makes a man feel like he doesn't have.
He's less important.
Yeah.
Okay, what were you gonna say?
I guess it'd be a problem.
It's a big problem?
Yeah, like, I don't know, like, typically in marriage, in traditional marriage, the man has, like, more of the power. Like, his power is probably getting, like,
Yeah.
in question, because she's making money.
Well, because you're the breadwinner, right? Like, you kind of do get to have more of a say. Because it's like, bitch, I keep the lights on. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's that. Paraphrase it however you like. But, like, that's the argument. But now, they've been separate for 6 months, and she has the kids. She's doing fine.
He feels like he's losing that utility that we were talking about with like the truck. In that one story we were reading.
I want to remember what you're talking about.
I don't remember which one it was, but it was like they were playing baseball, and then like the dude, his truck was beat up, and he felt like he lost his utility.
That's a deep cut. Yeah, you're talking about body and soul. Okay.
That hurt me, honestly.
What'd you say?
Like his connection was so deep, it like kind of hurt me mentally.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So the picture in that poem, the broken down Dodge or whatever we talked about, like sort of symbolized, like, because it's a thing of utility. It symbolizes him and the fact that he's not useful anymore, right? Like he couldn't provide for his wife or whatever, his marriage. That's interesting. I like that. I mean, don't bring up like body and soul in your papers, right? Like, but if part of why I build the class this way is I want you to be able to call back on some of that other stuff. Yeah, in a way, yeah. He basically what you're saying is her independence, as signified by her success in her career and also by her name change, right? Her independence is threatening to him, has damaged the traditional marriage that he wanted, because for him, yeah, the classical argument would be it takes away some of his power, which it does. But you're being even more specific. You're saying, well, the way his power works there is that he feels useful, like he feels the most useful as the breadwinner, right? He has that use. And when you say you don't have to be the breadwinner, you can be a breadwinner, he's not prepared to deal with that because he feels like that was his job, right? You've taken his job away in some respects. That's really interesting. I legit had never considered that. I like that. Okay. Cool. But yeah, mad deep cut. I was not prepared for that. All right. So yeah, so all that is to say, Holly, here in the late 80s, this movie came in 1988, is like this embodiment of this new kind of marriage. Right? She's a successful woman. She's more independent. She could take care of herself, but she wants to be with him, right? So she still wants to have that relationship. She just wants it to work a little differently. And that's his big struggle at the beginning of the film, is sort of coming to grips with that, right? That's why they have this fight. You feel like that's why they're separated, actually. Anything else you guys noticed? That was good. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I don't think it's that big of like a issue, but like the way that the lady came in, you know, like I mean, I know it was like she just barged into the bathroom, but like the way she looked at McClane,
Yeah.
it was more of like a. I want to say like maybe the wife was like talking about him a little bit.
Probably. Well, also, I mean, again, to be fair to her, you're talking about like her assistant or whatever.
Yeah, it's just.
With that very 80s haircut.
Yeah.
She, you also get the sense that like she picks up on the vibe of the room. You know, like if you'd ever walk into a room and two people are clearly fighting, you would feel uncomfortable, right? So there's also that. Along a similar line, I thought you were starting to talk about this. It's kind of interesting. You could make an argument out of this that when they are starting to reconnect, like I want to say Holly says, you know, I would like you there too, basically. And then those two people barge in, right?
I was just gonna say something about that.
What were you going to say about it?
I was gonna say like it seemed like I had taken a film class like a long time ago, but like there's
Sure.
all like everything in film is supposed to be like very like representative of something, and it was
Sure.
just interesting to see both those people come in at those time periods. Like,
Yeah.
they're talking about like she's like I'd like to see you too, and then two people coming there about to have sex, and then like the next few minutes like they're arguing, and then she's talking about like work and stuff like that, and then somebody comes in for work.
Yeah. Well, all of them are from work, right? Like the two people, like they're all from the office party, so they're all a part of this corporate world that we talked about last class. He's also not comfortable with that for different reasons that we covered. One way to take it, and I'm kind of talking about it in the line that you're using, is it seems like maybe they could have the conversation that Holly clearly wants to have, that he clearly wants to have, maybe even make up. She says, I'd like you there too, and then they barge in. That corporate world barges in too, gets in the way, right, interrupts. Because then immediately after they leave, she tries to pick it back up. She says, I miss you. But the spell is broken, right? Like, it's almost like he's been reminded of their issues that came from that corporate world, that money, whatever it is, right? Whatever those two people represent, seems to intrude on this connection they were trying to fix, right? So that's part of it too. But yes, in the like film class sort of way of thinking, they absolutely represent like her success and all that stuff for sure. Okay. The other thing I could bring up, and then we'll move on. I intentionally like to pause it here. He's going to be dressed this way the rest of the movie. This is basically his uniform for the movie. He's in what some people would call a wife beater, which is a hell of a name for a shirt. But it's an undershirt, right? And it's a tank top. It's not even a full shirt. At some point, he's not even going to have shoes, right? Like the way he looks, apart from the way he carries himself, is so, he just does not fit into this building, his surroundings, the people he encounters. He is not a part of this world. And the movie wants you to know that every time you see him. He is never going to look like he fits into this space, right? We talked a little bit last time about how he's maybe lower class than the people he's surrounded by. Did you ever hear that, man?
Oh, no.
Be careful. Love it. But basically the filmmakers always want you aware of the fact that he's a little lower on the socioeconomic sort of pole, right? Than maybe even his wife now, right? Even that maybe you could argue threatens him. Anything else? That was pretty good. Now we got enough. All right. What I would like to have done, but we're not going to have time, I wanted to briefly talk about Al, but again, we don't have time today. I'm probably going to do that on Monday. So if there are any Al fans in the room, just know that I did want to cover him. That just won't be today. So what we are going to look at instead, turn off the lights. I'll head off.
Also, I refuse to call him Al.
It's hard.
I call him Carl.
I have to really concentrate, actually. It helps that there's another Carl in the movie. But yeah, I struggle with that actually. I like before I talk about that scene, I'm always like, Al. Anyway, if you don't know what we're talking about, don't worry about it. So the scene we're going to look at now actually involves Carl, like the Carl in the movie. This is the first big gun battle, I think. Could technically be the second, actually. Anyway, they're on the roof, and they're chasing McClane. Carl is there, the big Viking-looking dude with his giant gun, and they're trying to kill him. McClane gets away. He ends up in the ventilation shaft, you know, all that stuff. All right, so same rules apply. See what you can come up with. We're going to talk about it. Oh, and I'm going to really watch the volume knob here because the guns are loud.
He's in the elevator shaft. Hast du das gehört?
Perfect. The elevators are locked off. You can't escape. Just shut it in and come back down. Oh, fuck. Carl, the police are probably on their way already. Carl. I can stall them, but not if they hear gunshots. If you lock him in, he'll be neutralized.
Come out to the coast. We'll get together. Have a few laughs. I know what a TV dinner feels like.
Okay. Turn the lights back on. So, that last scene and the way that we talked about it, just to be clear, I think does a really good job, like I said, of recapitulating what we talked about on Monday in class. This scene is talking about something totally else. It's related, absolutely, but this is a different line of argument, a different way of thinking about the movie. This would be a different paper, probably. All that out of the way. Anything you guys notice just stuck out to you, potentially interesting? Nothing? Just a bunch of guns going off?
That's what I picked up when I was watching it.
Just all the guns?
I just like action.
Okay, I mean, I guess part of it is we do have to, as best we can, we have to guard against, much like Vonnegut would tell us, just purely being entertained, right? We want to try to turn on the analytical part a little bit. Let's talk about all the guns. We actually didn't really get to talk about this in my last class because we had a dude in that class who knows how guns work, and his big point was this shit is hella inaccurate. Which again, is standard though. That's super standard for the genre. I mean, for instance, at some point they'd have to hit him. You know what I mean? That's a whole lot of bullets.
I don't know why Buddy with the AUG at the top didn't shoot him when he was jumping across.
Well, alright, so let's start with Carl. We're talking about Carl. Carl. Think about how everyone else in the scene behaves. Like, two dudes are chasing McClane. McClane is running because he's being shot at. That all feels, inaccurate gunplay aside, pretty realistic. Like, if people are shooting at me, I'm going to be running, I'm going to be ducking, I'm going to be cursing. Like, I love that in this scene where he's just like, ah, fuck, ah, shit. Like, he's like, yeah, anybody would do that. That makes all the sense in the world, right? And again, that's more of that everyman sort of depiction that we talked about last class. That fits his character. But Carl, think about, he's got a huge gun, first of all, and he's just like slowly walking across the top of the roof there. The wind is in his hair, he's lit, he's backlit, right? The way I characterize it, he's almost mythic in how he's depicted in this scene, right? Like, everyone else is running around all like, he's almost outside the story in this scene. Think about it, like, McClane just killed his brother, so he has this blood debt. That's a fun word you never get to use. He has a blood debt that he wants repaid. He's going to tell McClane later when they fight, we are professionals, but this is personal, right? Because of the blood debt. I'm going to ask you guys, I obviously have thoughts, but I want to see what you can do with it. Why do you think we would depict Carl in this way, like almost mythically, like he's almost not human through pretty much any of the movie, right? Like, think about, spoilers if you haven't seen it, but also like you're supposed to watch it. How does Carl die? He dies twice, right?
He gets stung by the chain.
The first, like, you think he's dead. You think when McClane and Carl fight, crazy knockdown, drag out, and then yeah, he hangs him with a chain, which is intense. And then you find out he's somehow not dead, which, let's be clear, when someone hangs you,
You suffocate.
that's how it works. Yeah, like that's why it was so popular for so long. It's very effective. But he lives somehow, and in the very last scene, Al kills him, right? So he's almost this unstoppable force. He's basically not human, this villain. And he's not even the main bad guy, right? He's like the right-hand man. Why depict this guy in this way, do you think? Like, why make him so... I don't want to use the term superhuman. I can't think of a better one, but he seems almost like a supervillain in a way. Why do you think we do that in this movie? Could you theorize any reasons?
I feel like I don't know. I can only think of it in like sense of production, just to make what's his name, Bruce Willis just look that much cooler. That his villain is just so bad.
It does sort of elevate McClane's abilities, his masculinity, all this when he finally does take him down. Although again, it does something else to it when you realize he doesn't take him down, right? Like not really. He does beat him, but he doesn't kill him, which is interesting. Yeah. And that's actually part of a larger conversation we're going to have in a minute with this scene. Yeah. Okay. Why else do you guys think? Why make this villain almost like otherworldly?
I would say it kind of ties into what he said, but like it kind of makes Bruce Willis look kind of like smaller compared to him. Like he towers over everybody.
Yeah, well, up until he beats him, right?
Yeah.
So he towers over him physically. First of all, he's just a big, I called him a Viking. Like he's just a big dude. How else, maybe again metaphorically or figuratively, how else does Carl maybe tower over McClane, do you guys think? Like in what way could you say he towers over him?
Does it symbolize the everyday man's climb and struggle to overcome what's ahead of him?
Maybe in a sense, but that still raises the question, like, what's ahead of him? Like, specifically, we're talking about Carl. So Carl's ahead of him. If you were going to begin to build an argument, like, what do we think Carl is in the movie is ultimately what I'm driving at. Because I agree with what you're saying. But that still means we have to solve what Carl is, what he represents.
I feel like it has some relation to death, but I don't know what.
It's funny in my notes, I do characterize him as an angel of death, like walking across the... But again, that's that mythic, like... Do you guys know what I mean when I say mythic?
Yeah, he's like a, I don't even know how to put it, like, I kind of like think about it in like video game terms, like a boss fight.
He feels like, I mean, he should be the final boss, but then you find out there's one past him. Yeah, like he's this end goal, this, again, like not even maybe human because he's so elevated above like what you think your abilities are or whatever, right? Yeah. But again, we got to try to, like, in what way? We don't know a lot about Carl, right? He's really big, he's really blonde, he's got a big gun. He's super upset with McClane because McClane killed his brother, and so he's going to deal with that. That's basically it, right? Like, we don't get anything else about him. I'll put it to you this way. And I think you guys could do most of this, but I don't know that you'd be able to do the end of it. I think Carl is, like, more than anyone else in this movie, probably the most stereotypically masculine guy, right? Like McClane is in some ways, and in some scenes especially, like, but again, he's that everyman. He's a little closer to us and what we could do. But Carl is huge and jacked. He's got a big gun and he's ordering people around. You get the sense like Hans at a couple points tries to tell him not to do something, and then Carl does it anyway. And you get the sense Hans is like, I mean, I'm his boss, but like, I'm not gonna like order him.
I'm not gonna tell him what to do or anything.
Yeah. So yeah, he's this overpowering presence, this overpowering masculinity. And then you add to that this question of like the blood debt. Again, very fun words you don't get to use very much. From his brother being killed. To me, he's even old school than somebody like McClane. When we think about McClane, again, 50s, 60s kind of values in some ways, you know. If we're talking about blood debts and all that, I mean, the way that he's hung and you think that kills him, right? Like this, we're talking about like medieval masculinity in some ways, right? Like I think it's intentional that he looks like a Viking. I really do, you could argue. That they cast this guy because they wanted this like super old school depiction of masculinity that McClane defeats. Kind of. And then in the end, he needs more help from his buddy Al to finish the job. That says something about what all three of those characters represent, right? and how sort of jockeying for position amid all these sort of stereotypical expectations maybe works. It's too complicated to do right now, and I'm sorry, but I want you to know that it's there. What Carl represents in the movie versus what McClane represents, and then the fact that he does have help in the end, and what Al represents, which we don't have time to talk about today. We'll probably do it on Monday. Those are all embroiled with each other in some way that's really interesting. Okay. Anything else you guys noticed? I got one other thing.
It was interesting his willingness to live. Like he was doing a bunch of crazy stuff. Like there's no way if I get to that shaft that I'm going down there. I'm just like, well, I'm shooting it out.
If people are chasing you with guns, you might.
Nah, we gonna have to shoot it out. I'm dead either way. I'm not doing that.
Well, here's what's interesting. So here's what's interesting. There's a couple ways to characterize it, but at no point in the film, really, that I can think of, does McClane hunt any of the bad guys. He's always just trying to survive. Think about the first guy he kills as an accident. They're falling down the stairs, right? The dude he kills at the no more table, that guy, he's defending himself, right? It's never really offense. It's always defense, even when he kills Hans in the end, spoilers. He's trying to save his wife, right? Like it's always motivated by protecting someone or protecting himself, or it's an accident. It's never murder, which is important, right, with his character. Lost my train of thought. Oh, but in this scene, he's just trying to survive. There's 3 guys chasing him. Maybe in more standard action movies, there would be a gunfight, and he would take him out. That's not how that works. It's 3 versus 1. So he's just kind of spraying. He's just trying to like sort of keep him back while he can get away. And there's 2 moments in this scene that I like a lot. With the gun, it's not just a gun. Mostly, I think it's not a gun, right? He uses it to unlock that door, and for the fan, and to get down the shaft. It's a tool. It's like a screwdriver almost, right? He uses it like that. So it's this element of like brains versus brawn when it comes to him versus especially the big Viking guy. The last thing I want to mention though, because it always gets brought up when people talk about this scene, and a lot of people actually have written about this movie, the fingertip grab is physically impossible.
Oh God, I was thinking the same thing.
No one can do
There's
that.
no way he caught that.
No one can do
He would
that.
have broke his fingers.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. And again, part of the reason so many people like this movie is you have this everyman character who, at times, can kind of go above and beyond maybe a little bit, but you believe a lot of what he does, right? A lot of what he's capable of. But that moment, and there's a few other ones like it in the movie, he goes well beyond what an everyman character should be able to do. And a lot of people take issue with that. But again, if we're taking the text on its own terms, we got to think about, well, I think the audience would expect that for one, in the genre. It's an action movie. You expect him to do action stuff. Like you said, like I was just into all the guns. But you expect it, right? You expect the fingertip grab. So at this point, it's like, again, what does it say about us as a people, society, a culture? Like, what does it say about our values that we see a character like this and we believe him to a point? Somebody in my last class kind of described him as like a suburban dad. I mean, you know. But then there's other moments where he does this stuff we're not capable of, right? Like, I guess the question I would give to you, and again, we probably have to move on. Yeah. But the question I would give to you is, you could argue that it's mostly those over-the-top moments that for us make him a hero. You know what I'm saying? The fingertip grab, fighting it out with 3 dudes and making like all this shit that like would not happen ever. For us as an audience, that's what we think a hero is. So aren't we also saying that for us as an audience, our definition of a hero is impossible? Is completely over the top, because we see this everyman and we like him, but as soon as he starts doing the really crazy stuff, we like him a lot more, right? Like, that guy's really cool. It's like, well, that guy doesn't exist, right? So that tells us something about us.
I hated it. It's like the part that really pissed me off was the fire hose thing. I really didn't like that at all.
Why?
It's just like, because
when he jumps off the building, right?
Yeah, I just like, I kind of want to see like a movie where the main character just dies and just he just gets shot and they just move on. Like it.
It'd be a very short movie.
Yeah, like a very, but like they just pretend like he wasn't really that important, even though like I just like sad stuff, honestly.
Okay.
That's what I'm
You ever seen No Country for Old Men?
That's
Check it
the
out.
cowboy movie, right? No, that's another movie.
I mean, it's in Texas.
Yeah.
Really good. Coen Brothers. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. I'm not gonna spoil anything. It's right up your alley. No Country for Old Men. Check it out. Anyway, you let me lose the train of thought. It's telling us something about what we think about heroes and how we define them, basically. Especially in the 80s. I know you guys weren't there. I was barely there. But. All right. Last thing we're going to talk about today. And I should mention, we're not covering everything in these scenes. I want to give you guys a really good idea of what's possible when it comes to whatever text you choose and whatever you end up talking about. But you don't have to cover everything that we're talking about in a paper. That would be insane. But also know that there is more to talk about. Some of you are bored already, right? Like, we're just doing our best to navigate this. All right, the last thing we're looking at today. This is probably the most famous line in the movie is in this scene. And it's going to be the end of the scene. But basically, this is right after McClane has killed a couple of those guys. This is the no more table, and he kills that guy. He's going to get a walkie-talkie, and he's going to call Hans, and they're going to have an exchange. That's really the whole scene.
All of you relax. This is a matter of inconvenient timing, that's all. Police action was inevitable. As it happens, necessary. So let them fumble about outside and stay calm. This is simply the beginning.
I thought I told all of you I want radio silence until further.
I'm very sorry, Hans. I didn't get that message. Maybe you should have put it on a bulletin board. I figured since I waxed Tony and Marco and his friend here, I figured you and Carl and Franco might be a little lonely, so I wanted to give you a call.
How does he know so much about this?
This is very kind of you. As you are a mysterious party crash. You're most troublesome. For a security guard.
Sorry, Hans, wrong guess. Would you like to go for double jeopardy where the scores can really change? These are very bad for you.
Who are you then?
Just a fly in the ointment, Hans. A monkey in the wrench. A pain in the ass.
Check on all the others. Don't use the radio. See if he's lying about Marco and find out if anyone else is missing. Mr. Mystery Guest. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Unless you want to open the front door for me.
I'm afraid not. But you have me at a loss. You know my name, but who are you? Just another American who saw too many movies as a child. Another orphan of a bankrupt culture who thinks he's John Wayne, Rambo, Marshall Dillon.
I was always kind of partial to Roy Rogers, actually. I really like those sequin shirts.
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
All right. So then, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, is the line I was alluding to. Pretty famous. Oh, I missed the chair. Things you guys noticed. Stood out to you. Potentially important. Like, we're just trying to build that muscle a little bit today.
As far as like masculinity goes, like they were trying to outman each other, like when they were talking. Like they were
Yeah,
trying to,
I think so.
one-up each other the whole time.
Why do you think that? I agree with you, but why do you think that?
Bruce, or what is his name?
McClane, yeah.
He was when he called him, he was like trying to be all cool and stuff, like trying to intimidate him. And then like his buddy in the back, I don't remember which one said it. He was like, "How does he say? Like, we not finna sell that. We not finna."
Yeah,
sell
don't sell
that
me
for
out,
free."
man. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was
Yeah.
like, "Well, who are you? Are you a security guard?" He's like, "No," and they're like just trying to like out tough each other.
I agree with that. I feel you on that. I mean, really, this is, and it ties into the scene we watched a second ago, but this is something that happens throughout the movie. You have what's called pissing contests. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but as you said, it's two guys sort of trying to outman each other. When we meet Al, which again, I'm going to try to get to Monday, when we meet him in that convenience store, and he's talking to that clerk, their exchange is exactly the same. The clerk is a dick. But it's because he's like, well, are these for you? And he's like, they're for my wife. She's pregnant. He's like, yeah, sure, buddy. And he's got a toothpick in his mouth. The whole thing is like, who can be more stereotypically masculine here? Al doesn't really participate, but the clerk basically says, like, you're your pregnant wife. Like, he works to emasculate him the whole time. You see this happen all over the movie. But yeah, especially here, especially this idea, and we're going to talk about a little bit more about how it works. But on one level, it is Hans and McClane trying to one-up each other, trying to win this conversation somehow.
It's like whenever like men like shake hands for the first time, like you know, like every time you shake a guy's hand for the first time, it's like before you shake hands, like he better not be weak. And then it's like I gotta outstrength him. I gotta make sure my grip is better. Like it's just weird.
Is that still a thing?
My dad raised me like that. My dad was like, make sure when you shake somebody's hand, you don't like soft hand them.
No. I mean, I know about this. I know about it. That's funny. Okay. Yeah, that's a real thing. I have a story I can tell you, but I won't waste our time. But yeah, that's a real thing. That's a fair, I guess, comparison. I still want to think about how it works, though. So, like, we say they're trying to one-up each other, they're trying to out-tough each other. How do you guys see that work? I agree with you. How do you guys see that working? Does anybody feel like a similar sort of thing? Like, I'll put it to you this way. What do they end up talking about in this conversation that they have with each other?
They end up talking about, like, how movies like depict the men, like American men.
Yeah. Hans starts it, right? He says, like, you grew up on too many movies, you think you're John Wayne, and he names a couple other people. Rambo, this is 88, that's super topical. Like, those movies are still coming out. Yeah, what were you going to say?
The Rambo thing.
Yeah. What is that? First of all, that sounds a little bit like somebody we've talked about before, right?
Who, Rambo?
No, I mean maybe, but no. What Hans is saying, like you think you're John Wayne, you think you're Rambo.
Oh, that's from
It's like Mary.
Yeah.
Slaughterhouse 5 too, right?
Good.
Talking about that.
It sounds a little bit, I mean, with some key differences, a little bit like Mary. Now, one of the key differences is, if you remember, Mary comes to the narrator and says something like, "You're gonna write a story that's gonna be fit for one of those movies. You're gonna mistell it, right? You're not gonna give us a fair depiction, an accurate depiction. You're gonna trick people," is what she says. Hans says, "You think you're John Wayne. You think you're those guys." So Hans is saying what to McClane? If he said,
want to be.
he says you've tricked yourself into thinking, yeah, that you're capable, that you're in a movie, right? Which, I mean, funnily enough, he is, but they don't know that, right? Because they're in the movie. So he's basically saying that he's fallen prey to. He's calling him weary, right? He's saying you're just like that guy. You don't realize it, but you've been misled. You think what John Wayne does is possible. And then McClane has a really interesting retort. Did anybody catch what he comes back with?
He's partial to Roy Rogers.
Roy Rogers. Does anybody know who that is? That's a deep cut. Roy Rogers is similar to John Wayne. Like he was a cowboy figure. Did anybody catch the description that McClane gives of Roy Rogers? Like why he says he likes him? He says he's partial to something. He said he's really partial to the sequin shirts. Does anyone know what sequins are? Dude wore sequin shirts. So he's a little different from John Wayne. He's a little flashier, a little. Well, it was a TV show, I believe. Now I'm using my memory a little bit. I should have looked this up right before class, but yeah, like if you had John Wayne, Rambo, sort of up here in terms of masculine depictions and all that comes with that we've talked about, right? Roy Rogers is still in that discussion, but he's he's a little lower down. Okay, not quite so, okay. Why would McClane do that, do you think? Why does he say that?
I feel like it kind of like showcases how flashy McClane is, since Roy Rogers was like a flashy person in his respective movies. And
I mean, comparatively, yeah. I mean, I guess so. I don't know that we would call McClane flashy.
I think he's just trying to talk shit. I think he's just trying to be like, I'm gonna beat you and I'm gonna do it with style. That's what it seems like.
This is shit talking. And again, we wouldn't necessarily call it that in our papers, but in the common parlance, yeah, this is absolutely, they're talking trash, they're talking shit to each other. But again, like, I mean, I feel like McClane wins. I don't know if you guys agree. I feel like he wins. And what I'm curious about, if you go with me on that, maybe you don't, which I'd be willing to hear. If you feel like McClane wins, my question is why? I think it has to do with Roy Rogers first. And then I think it has to do with Yippee-Ki-Yay motherfucker.
He was doing it from the jump. He had them in there scared because when he was like, I just killed your boys, and they were like, what? Like, they were all scared. Like, from that point on, he was like just like one-upping them the entire time.
Okay, good. All right. So where we start the conversation then, think about what really happens. What, other than, hey, I just murdered all your buddies, which would obviously trouble anybody, okay? Even more than that, you could argue, what specifically seems to trouble those guys when he calls them, when McClane calls them?
They were confused that he even had the walkie-talkie.
Well, that, but there's a specific,
Their name.
he knows who they are. He doesn't really know anything more than that, but they don't know that, right? But he knows their names, and they don't know anything about him. And Hans even says, you have me at a loss. Like, you have me at a disadvantage. You have knowledge, and I don't. And they seem troubled by that, right? And what's interesting in the conversation that they have, it starts from this position where McClane has some knowledge. They don't have knowledge, right? Well, what does Hans do as a result? He moves immediately to talking about stereotypical depictions, right? He's like, all right, well, I don't know anything about you. I'm going to guess that you're a security guard. And he finds out that that's wrong. He's like, well, shit. You're an American man, probably, pretty clearly. So you grew up with John Wayne. You grew up with Marshall Dillon, he says, Rambo. He just assigns these American masculine stereotypes to McClane. And then McClane doubles down. He's like, you know what? I mean, those guys are fine. I'm really more into Roy Rogers, this guy that you may or may not have heard of, Mr. European Man, right? He sort of, to bring all that back home for you in a way that hopefully makes sense, McClane starts from a place of knowledge. Hans has none, so he has to use stereotypes, right? And then McClane says, oh, you don't know what you're talking about there either, because I'm from America and you're not, so I have more knowledge here too. He keeps beating him with things he actually knows. And Hans, I mean, it's not a fair fight. And so that's how he wins. But then he sums all that up with Yippee-Ki-Yay motherfucker. And I'm going to ask you, and you may not have an answer, but I want you to try. I feel like he sums everything up I just said with Yippee-Ki-Yay motherfucker. And I'm curious if you guys can attempt to crack that egg.
Is it like he's taking on the masculine hero persona that the villain is implying that he is? Because he's like, oh, then you're just like some guy cowboy who's gonna save the day. So he's like, well, I'll be that for you.
Well, that's absolutely the Yippee-Ki-Yay. Absolutely. Because again, that's this ridiculous, old school, you know, you can almost see him on a horse and like it rears up, right? So then the Yippee-Ki-Yay is yeah, absolutely. That's half of it. He takes on those stereotypes, he kind of like throws up a middle finger to Hans as you're describing and says, you know what, yeah, I'll be that for you. We'll see how that works out for you. Sure. We still have to deal with motherfucker. I'm telling you, it's important. It's not just fun to say, because it is.
It's just disrespectful, I feel like. Like, if someone hit me with that, like, someone finishes me, like, at an argument with that, I'm gonna be stuck. Like, what did you just say?
It is a very strong, I mean, no one really takes it literally. No one really.
Yeah.
But it's an exclamation point on the end of a sentence, for sure. But I think it's more than that here. What kind of speech is that? Motherfucker. What kind of speech is that? Did you say it's a bad word?
Yeah.
That's what my father girl would say. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. My wife tells me all the time, you're not wrong. Why? Why is it a bad word? Other than its literal definition, which is certainly a hurtful thing to call someone. Like fuck is what we're saying, right? That's the bad word. Why? You guys have been given reasons. I know you have. That's why you don't personally find
What means, what the word means?
Like, why is it a bad word?
Yeah.
That's what we was taught. Yeah.
Yeah, but you were given reasons.
No.
No.
Never?
My parents told me what it stood for, like the acronym for it. Like, it was like a medieval thing.
What?
Yeah, it's
No.
like fornication under...
That's not
consent.
true.
It's not true?
That's not true.
My parents were some damn cat. They lying like shit.
Jesus.
They were like, do not say that. And they're like, it means this. And I was like,
Okay. Well, I was not prepared. No. No. Okay. Look, I'm not going to give you a history lesson. There is a lot of history behind it. But surely at some point, someone has said something to you like, using that language is like low class.
Well,
Okay, well then there was a reason. All right. That's true. Historically, lower class people that spoke a certain language, other than the upper class people in England who spoke a different language, used words like that because they spoke a different language. So when we say it's low class, we literally mean that's what poor people say. Vulgar means low class. Like, you have less money. That's what it means. So motherfucker is a low class thing to say. But the point I'm trying to make to you guys is, I think when he says it to Hans, it works in a similar way to how we're talking about Yippee-Ki-Yay with the cowboy stuff.
he's just saying he's some like low class cowboy, basically. Like, he's just some like, he's like spitting his face at the fact of like, oh yeah, I am that American you're talking about. I'm coming, I'll see you in a minute.
Yeah, good. So again, in the same way we talked about Yippee-Ki-Yay, you know what? You want me to be a cowboy? I'll get a hat, motherfucker, right? Yeah. And the second half of that is the point I'm trying to stress to you here. It's easy to gloss over that because it's just a hell of a thing to say to a guy, right? Or a woman. It's a hell of a thing to say to anybody. But in this case, given what it's surrounded by, motherfucker to me is essentially, it almost works like an American flag. Do you know what I'm saying? Like in fireworks. What more American thing could you say to a stereotypically European invading force who's kidnapped all these other Americans? What's the most American thing you could say to that guy? Motherfucker. That's American speech. That's low class speech. That's like working class, you don't have a savings account speech type of thing. That's awesome. Anyway. So if I were writing a body paragraph, for instance, I would work real hard to find a way to quote that and talk about the two parts, right? Yippee-Ki-Yay, we absolutely have to talk about, because they talk about Roy Rogers and John Wayne and all. You have to. But if you do that, you almost do a disservice to the movie to not say, well, could they be doing something similar with motherfucker? And I think they are. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop talking about it. He says motherfucker. There's no R on it. That's a marker of class as well. Motherfucker is what a posh person might say if they wanted to describe a person who copulated with their mother. But without the R, it's a different thing, right? It's less bookish. That's important. All right. What I want to do now, oh yeah, we got time. All right. I wanted to save a little bit of time at the end of class, and we've done that, so hooray. To talk about what you're going to do this weekend, hopefully, and kind of how we're going to proceed. So to begin with, your homework this weekend is just a brainstorming assignment. It's a discussion post. Just to be clear, none of us are writing about Die Hard, right? It's a class text. And what that means is you're all going to pick your own thing, and that would make it borderline impossible to have class unless we all had one thing we all knew about. So that's what this is, okay? So we're going to keep practicing with this. We will occasionally talk about other things other people are working on, but for the most part, this is practice. This is to get us into the right sort of mindset, the right approach, and you're going to take that and apply it to whatever you want to talk about. So what I want to do today is start that conversation. Simply put, what are some texts you're either thinking about right now, or since maybe this is the first time you've actually been faced with that question, anything you can come up with that might work. So for instance, I've had a bunch of great papers in the past, but these two stand out for different reasons. One young woman years ago wrote an awesome paper about Shrek. You may be familiar. You probably haven't seen it in a while. My kids discovered it. I've seen it a lot. And it's doing a lot with gender studies in the way that we talk about it, and expectations, and how that stuff should work. Think about, again, I'm imagining most of you have seen this movie. Think about the kind of character Shrek is, right? And why he's not supposed to be the hero, and why he is, and absolutely what it means. I hate that I know this movie so well. Absolutely what it means when Fiona kisses him and gets transformed into her real self, her beautiful self, or whatever it is, and it's an ogre rather than the hot princess. We're absolutely thinking about some of the stuff we're thinking about, right? The other example I'll give you, and I've not seen this show, but again, she wrote a great paper. It's called Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, that's a good show.
I've heard good things, but by the time it came out, I'm pretty sure, I know I was in grad school, but I may have had kids. And you just don't have time. But she wrote a great paper about that show. Apparently there's a lot of Hamlet allusions in the show, and I happen to know Hamlet really well, so I was able to talk to her about it. But the point I'm making to you guys is there's all kinds of possibilities here. And I would like to, as I said, help you start your homework so that you don't go into it completely blind. I'm just going to ask again, any text you guys have already thought about maybe, or even just now in this moment, you're like, well, this could work. I just want to talk about it a little bit.
The one, when I first read the prompt, the one that came to my mind was Married with Children.
Okay.
I think his name is Al Bundy, I believe.
Yeah.
But it's not, I don't think it was in the 1990s, so I don't.
I mean, it may have started in the 90s. I mean, in the 80s, it definitely went into the 90s. Why do you think, why did you think about that show?
It's because, I've always seen him as, the dad role that a lot of people have adopted.
Well, nowadays?
I wouldn't say, yeah.
What do you mean by that?
He's, kind of a terrible dad. His family is just bad. His
family's awful and dirty, and he's a loser. According to the traditional metric, he's probably around my age, probably a little bit older, and he works in a shoe store, and
it's a women's shoe store as well.
Sure, and I think that's intentional, and he's got no prospects, and you get the sense that he's just kind of making ends meet, and he feels very small in a lot of episodes, right? Yeah, absolutely. Well, the reason this show was a big deal when it came out is it was, I mean, again, this is when I was a kid, so it's a little bit, but if it wasn't the very first show to do this, it was among the very first, definitely one of the most popular, to take that standard sitcom, which is, you know, like Brady Bunch or whatever. Here's the weird thing, even Brady Bunch was groundbreaking when it came out, because it was two people that weren't married getting together. Like in the 60s and 70s, that's borderline scandalous, you know what I'm saying? But here you have like what should be, again, if we're thinking about McClane's traditional idea of marriage, like 50s, 60s, whatever, he should have a job where he can provide for the family. They should do moderately well. You want them to be middle class. The kids are mostly clean cut. Maybe they have some trouble at school, but they fix it and they work on their homework and all that, you know. But it's not like that at all. This guy fails, Al, fails in almost every metric for the like masculinity test, right? He barely provides. His kids are terrible. Yeah, that absolutely is trying to have us think about what we expect of, I guess, sitcom dads. Because again, that sitcom dad is what we hold up as a society in some way and say, well, that's what you're supposed to be, right? That's what you're supposed to work toward. And then you get this guy, and it's like, well, why is he so different? Why does that resonate? It was really popular for a long time. It's like, have values shifted or have understanding shifted? Has expectations shifted in some way, right? Yeah, that would work. That'd be cool. If you do end up doing a TV show, I should say at this point, you would want to limit your focus, because you couldn't write about, I forget how long that show went. You couldn't write about the whole thing. That'd be bananas. I would ask you to pick like maybe 2 episodes. But yeah, that would work. Never had one on Married with Children, actually. That would be interesting. Other texts. We actually started class talking about this one, so I won't go back through it, but if you were here for it, we talked about Scarface. Do what?
I said legendary in Spanish.
Okay. I mean, sure. Technically before the 1990s, right? Or I suppose literally.
I think it came out in...
It was in the 70s.
Yeah.
Like 79 or something.
Yeah.
But I would allow it if you, because we had this discussion. Other texts struck you guys. I'm hoping you thought of it at least a little bit before now, because, you know, mostly had a week, I suppose.
I was before, because I had watched your video before, but like, before that I was going to do Captain America.
Like one of the movies?
Yeah, the first Captain America movie.
Okay, why?
I don't know, it's just like, when I was reading Slaughterhouse 5, it reminded me a lot of Captain America, and I felt like I could write off of it.
Why?
He's just like they made him a Superman, like a super soldier, like
yeah.
what a soldier's supposed to be, and like
Good.
a hero. So I just felt like that was interesting to see. And then like it's like he's the polar opposite of what what's his name is? I forget the guy's name in Slaughterhouse 5, the main character.
Oh, Billy
Pilgrim, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, his name is fucking Captain America. Like,
yeah. You don't get more American than that.
First of all, he doesn't have a weapon, right? He's not offensive. He's defensive. He has a shield. Mm-hmm. But it's the American flag. Like, he defends himself with the American flag, basically, and like all that represents.
And it's unbreakable. You can't break it because it's made of.
Can't be broken.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess you can kind of use it as well, but it's mostly about defense. Yeah. Absolutely stuff going on. First of all, just with the way that character is built, I've not seen that movie, but I know a little bit about the guy's backstory. Here's what's interesting about that. He's rags to riches, in a way.
Because he started off as a little scrawny guy, and then he became like, but he was brave and he had heart, and then they made him a hero.
They made him a hero, though. That's kind of interesting. So, like, go on this trip with me real quick. So, like, I agree. He seems to have all the, as you say, the heart, the, like, internal makeup, the characteristics that make a person a hero in the way that we've defined it as a culture, right? The no quit, the can't be beaten, not gonna, like, bend to anybody, right? Like, he has that. And they see that in him, and then they make him a hero, though. That's really weird.
It's interesting, because it's like, is he not already a hero? Why does the physicality of him have to change in order for him to be a hero?
The movie would suggest not.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of the important stuff, and you can't be a hero without that. Mm-hmm. The movie suggests. But it also suggests dude, you gotta do some pull-ups or something.
Right.
You need some creatine. You gotta we're gonna inject you. We're gonna fix you up. You're gonna look the part.
The reason they gave him like the super soldier serum, I remember, was like they threw a grenade during the drill. But
Oh, and
it
he
was,
jumps
the same
on it.
grenade. He jumped on it. He was just like some little small guy, and all the rest of them ran. So they're like, he's the one.
Yeah, yeah, and again, that is important. And we were saying that is still important to us, our values, and what we think is heroic. But we're also admitting that if you don't look the part, you're not going to be one of our heroes.
Right.
It simultaneously lifts up the inside and also says, well, it's not the most important, or maybe it's the most important, but you need more than that too.
Right.
Yeah.